Welcome back to Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And this is the show where we dive into what it means to be your true self, your deeper self, your higher self, how to connect with that, how to undo some of the conditioning, live your most authentic life, aligned with nature, reconnecting with that. So we're doing this remotely. We've got Alexa down in Sydney. I'm still up here at the holding it down at the cabin in the woods, looking like a lumberjack. Mm-hmm. I've literally been out, chopping wood up at the LFM health property. I don't know what we're calling it, the health hub property, the up and coming health retreat. But I love it.
Left to your own devices, you're just literally out doing man shit. I mean, you worked over the weekend, you did the markets, and as soon as you had any second, you're out with the guys, doing work, doing stuff with wood. You're always doing
plans. It's amazing. That property, I can't wait. I'm getting more pumped, getting more motivation to just make the men's group stuff happen up there, despite being typically at the markets on the weekends.
Finally, guys. Just for the record, I keep telling Isaac he needs to do this. I was just talking with some girlfriends recently. I have a lot of single girlfriends, and it's so hard to find good men. And I literally just keep saying to them, Isaac needs to get his shit together and start doing men's work, and we need good, strong, masculine men, and we need them. There's such a shortage right now.
Yeah, we've got some real world ideas coming up, and there's a skeleton crew up there, but that's all it takes. It takes a few good minds, a few strong men, and the plans are in works. There's a lot going on up there that I'm really excited about. Speaking of Natural AF, connecting to nature, just real quick. Up at the property, they were talking about how the kookaburras and the butcher birds and whatever had disappeared for a little bit, and then now they're back. And they, Billy, who's up there, was talking about how that's kind of a signal that nature took a break and is back and is rebooting. And that's the way he described it. And I was like, that's so funny, because we had the same thing with snakes at our property. We have pythons here, and normally they're out, but we hadn't seen them in like 18 months or something.
This is the time of year. We're coming out of winter and entering into spring. And interesting. I was just listening to a podcast over the last few days talking about the same thing, just the seasons and the natural rhythms. And when we're really connected to nature and those natural cycles, that is very normal in winter to retreat and go within and sort of, be more introspective and things like that. And then spring, this is the time. And we can see it where we live. All the animals start to come out and they're nesting, and it's really beautiful to watch. And Isaac and I hope to be nesting soon too, but we'll keep you posted on that.
Keep you posted. Yeah, but it feels right. It feels like, spring is definitely sprung here, and being up at the property and getting this new revitalized energy and these plans coming up, like we got some really cool ideas kicking around. With that new energy, we're just going for it. And after the festival, it'll be so cool to see what other things flourish out of it. This podcast was rebooted after last year's festival, so we're still carrying that same energy. So we're just going to dive into it, get creative, figure out ways. I mean, we have some amazing guests coming up that we can't wait to interview. It's going to be amazing the next few months.
I had sort of just finished confirming the next lot of guests, like for the next month. They're going to be great. And now that we're pretty much going to get most of the speakers that were at the festival, it's going to be epic. And I've actually got some other guests lined up for the end of the year that have been a long time coming, and it's just going to be epic, guys. We're taking it to the next level.
Just keeps getting better and better. And this episode is no different. This episode was a joy. I wasn't really familiar with our guest beforehand, but I trust Lex, and she hooked this up, and it was amazing.
Well, I have to shout out to Christopher Kay, who's a previous guest of ours. Our regular listeners should know him. We absolutely love him. After our interview, we've become such good friends with him, and he highly, highly recommended Julie Santall because he interviewed her for the film, for Anavasi. And it's just really funny because when I got onto her, I realized that I actually kind of did, we sort of knew each other, by 6 degrees of separation. And again, we just clicked with her so well. She's such an absolute gem and a wealth of knowledge. And I find it really interesting too that we kind of work in slightly different ways, but the work that we do is so adjacent or parallel or like whatever you want to call it. It's so similar. So yeah, what this conversation with Julie just resonated with me on such a deep level, and just the way that I work with people and my objective when it comes to working with people. And it's getting to the root cause of things. It's not just slapping a Band-Aid over it or taking a pill or, you know, whatever the mainstream solution is. I'm putting that in air quotes. It's getting to the root cause. And a lot of it is in our familial lines, the ancestral stuff, the trauma that not only we've experienced, but our lineage has experienced, and that comes through us. And I just, love this conversation so much. I've got to say, I've been copping some slack from family and friends, mainly family, but there was quite a string of interviews that apparently on every episode, I was like, I absolutely love this conversation. One of my all-time favorites, but literally they were. I have so many all-time favorites now because, I mean, we're coming up to like almost 60 episodes, which like 50 of them we've done together. And yeah, there's just so many good ones and so much gold.
Yeah. And this episode, we fit kind of right in that sweet spot of some of the things that Alexa and I have lived and experiences that we've had coming to our own place of, you know, healing old wounds, stopping the recycled patterns of negative behaviors that we've both lived, and how that truly works versus the numbing or the checking out or the spiritual bypassing and all that. So Julie really cuts to the chase. She gets into it and speaks some powerful truths. And if you follow the thread through some of these interviews, I think Julie said that to you like an email or offline or something about how we know a lot of the same people and we're speaking to some problems from kind of a fresh perspective, but it's been there all along, but there's so much noise out there. There's so many people, you know, some with good advice, some with not so good advice.
But discernment is so important.
Yeah, we're not using as much of the fancy words and all the spiritual speak and all that, but this is just real. So you follow the thread through a lot of these episodes as we go back. You'll find a way through whatever it is you're facing, because all of these people have all gone through their own healer's journey. That's another one, hero's journey, but healer's journey. You know, the wounded healer is a really powerful archetype, and there's some strong resonance there. So
totally.
You get a lot of it.
If you listen to this episode and it resonates, and of course, like by all means, if you want to work one-on-one with Julie, absolutely, she's amazing. But for women out there listening, if this work is kind of speaks to you, and especially like this conversation, if you hear this and there's something that really resonates and you want to go deeper, please join the priority list for Aligned Woman, which is my 8-week group coaching program, which is the launch is imminent. Like literally within the next week, you're going to be able to apply. This has been a long time coming. This is really like a culmination of all of my experiences, the work that I do with people, all the modalities I bring in. I've got guest experts coming in. It's going to be phenomenal, and I'm so excited. And so, I really want to highlight that for this episode in particular, because like I said, the work that Julie and I do is, very parallel, and this is the deep stuff. This is the work. So if you're keen, head to that link and you can join the priority list, and you'll get first access when the program launches.
Yeah, I know a lot of women are talking about it. There's been some buzz about it, but I was really impressed. You did a knockout job with your workshop at the festival and gave people a taste of some of the work that they'll go through in the program. And I got a little sneak peek to some of that as well. And I'm actually really impressed. I mean, I know you know your stuff, but there are some things that you pulled out when you were talking through your workshop that I had no idea about, that I found really helpful to think about. So that's just like a smidgen of it, and I'm excited to see how it goes. And I know there's going to be a lot of transformation happening, a lot of good stuff. So
yeah, I can't wait.
Don't miss out.
And in the meantime, for the men that are waiting for Isaac to get his shit together and get the men's groups together, you can, of course, support us through Natural Art Form, which all of our regular listeners know Natural Art Form so well by now. It's come in super handy for Isaac, as he's been lumberjacking around without me up on Billy's property.
Yeah. Well, literally taking, as an impromptu trip, I didn't bring any toiletries with me. So obviously no deodorant, no anything. And I came home smelling a bit ripe, a bit like a Sasquatch or a Yeti instead of a lumberjack. So I actually have some with me, but I put some refreshed forest on. Still haven't showered in a couple of days, and smelling like pine. So that's a great way to neutralize odor. It'll literally reverse body odor if you've been out sweating it out. And it's strong enough for, the bearded man in your life. If your husband is not into natural deodorants, he thinks all that stuff is great for the women and the children, but for men, you need a manly product. This one really stands up. And you can go online. Back in the States, we've got 2 scents. We've got Calm and Forest. Both of those will work for either sex. We got a lot of feedback at the markets, and women and men both buy either product. Some of the women prefer the floral one, but we have Calm, which is probably a new favorite for everyone. And get really good feedback on the scent combinations. And I'm confident that either one will be fine and you'll enjoy it. And it definitely works. And you can buy those now at naturalartform.com and get 10% off your order, any order, using code NaturalAF10. We've had a few of those coming in recently, so thank you so much for everyone who's been supporting our business, supporting this project and our mission to help people reconnect with nature, get some of the chemicals out of their system, get the chemicals and synthetics out of your lives, and replace it with something that is going to benefit your health. So, onward.
And if you head to the website and you haven't joined the mailing list already, jump on that. The September newsletter is going to be out in the next couple of days. And we've got a new product launch coming very, very soon. And so if you join the mailing list, you'll get first dibs on that when we pop it up on the online store.
Absolutely. That's where you get all the news first. And if you don't want to wait around for the next episode, but you want to get the earliest round of new products or discount codes and all that, yeah, definitely get on the newsletter.
So we have to let you know, guys, quickly that we had to record this interview through Zoom, which we don't normally use. And we thought we had the correct view up as we normally would, where you can see both screens. Unfortunately, it recorded the whole thing on speaker view, so it will jump back and forth between the videos. So we apologize for that, but I'm sure most of you are probably just listening anyway, so it's totally irrelevant. But just want to tell you that that's just a one-off, and it'll go back to normal as of next week.
Yep. It'll never happen again until the next time. Yeah. And if it looks like I was sleeping like a vampire bat and my face is all puffy, I don't know why. Maybe I ate too much sugar or something. I have no idea, but my face was puffy.
He looks like he just rolled out of bed, but I can assure you he didn't. I don't know what was going on that morning, but I was getting ready and we both got up at the same time. I was in getting ready. I came out, we sat down to record, and I looked at his face. I was like, why is your face so puffy? You look like you just got out of bed. He's like, I don't know.
I know.
So,
I need to gua sha it.
Totally. Maybe I reckon something bit him in his sleep. Isaac notoriously swells up from bug bites.
Maybe it was a python. Maybe I had the python wrapped around my neck while I was sleeping or something. I don't know. So,
all right.
Without any more ado, let's forge forward into this journey of healing and transformation with Julie Santall.
Julie began her career 35 years ago as an emergency nurse in the UK and later specialised in advanced trauma life support. Her experiences led her to train in drug and alcohol counselling before retraining as a holistic counsellor and psychotherapist, and now runs a private counselling practice. Her passion is to guide people in discovering how empowered they can be in their own lives and appreciate how their emotions and symptoms are messages from within to develop greater strength, purpose, and direction.
All right, Julie, so good to have you on the show. I was reading a little bit about some of your background, a little bit more in depth off of your website, and I like it. You were a nurse, but you were originally kind of focused more on the trauma space.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of trauma work. I was in the Army. I learned as a combat medic and went a bit deeper into that with the unit that I was with. And that's really shaped and informed how I kind of, approach different things. It's kind of tempered me in a bit to where I'm a bit, I don't know, maybe a little more, I don't know, not as soft, but a bit more like hardened. I don't know if you've had that same experience to some things, but yeah.
Absolutely. I think sometimes, hardened. I think boundaried is probably a really good word, because the energy of trauma is such that if you allow yourself to absorb that, because there's so many different energies going on in that immediate situation, it by necessity you have to become a little bit bounded and a little bit separate, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do your job properly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to be super focused. But yeah, I started off as a trauma nurse when I did my nurse training back in the 80s, in the dark ages. We were on, on the wards. And as soon as I was in emergency, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But
Yeah.
it probably comes, I mean, in subsequent years now, I've looked back and I realized that the reason why is because my nervous system was from my childhood, because I had a traumatic childhood. My nervous system was set on. So I'm like, so when I was in that stressful situation, I became super clear and super focused because that's what I was used to.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why. But yeah, I spent how many years from 1980? Well, I actually worked with the army over in Cyprus when I was married. I worked as a army nurse with the family's medical center in Berengaria in Cyprus, and so inside squaddies and the family medical center, and went out to any emergencies on the island that to do with the army. And then I moved back to England and worked in the emergency departments in London, and I was actually in the Chelsea and Westminster before it changed, when the bomb went off in 1991 in the Victoria Station, when it was supposedly the IRA, but now we know that it probably wasn't. But a nail bomb went off, and that was before triage. And I remember we heard it. We were on night duty, and we heard it go off, and we're like, "What the hell's that?" It sounded like a car backfiring? But I walked out into the waiting room to see what was going on, and it was like the zombie apocalypse. Like there was people covered in blood, just
Oh my gosh.
literally walking towards me, and I'm like, "Whoa!" And I ran back in. I said, "I think you better come out." But yeah, and then I moved over here and was sponsored by the Alfred, worked in the trauma center there, and moved into complex psychosocial drug and alcohol with the heart program, and then gradually, steadily moved my way through until 2012. I had this sort of I was working for a pharmaceutical company, and I was traveling around the country teaching children how to inject human growth hormone because they were born without pituitaries or Noonan syndrome. And I was also working with reps, and I began to see what was going on in the pharmaceutical companies, and it began to be really uncomfortable. And then you know how the universe or God, however you want to look at it, kind of like put something in your way. And I had 3 prolapsed discs and I couldn't work. And I was walking. All I could do was either walk or lie down. That's all I could do. And I walked past the Gawler Center, which was a meditation center, and they used to do meditations for people who had cancer. And there was a sign outside, and it was a sign, and it said, "Are you in pain?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I am. I'm in a lot of pain, emotionally and physically." And it said, "Learn to meditate." And I thought, well, why not? I've got nothing else to do. And that was the beginning of my, like, I don't know, I can't even explain it. It was like everything opened up. Do you know what I mean? It was like,
wow,
everything opened up, and I began to see things in a different way, and it gave me space, made me start questioning. I had a year left working at the pharmaceutical company, and I knew I couldn't stay. And so they actually made me redundant. And it was just a series of situations whereby my relationship finished. And I heard one day when I was sitting outside in the garden, and I was contemplating life, and I heard this voice, and it was a very separate voice, and it just said, "You're fighting a mirror." And it was like a light went off inside me. It was like, oh my word, it's me. It's coming from me. I'm doing this. And then it's been a journey since then, you know?
Yeah.
wow. I got shivers with that, because I didn't have quite of a clear example of that, but there was like a spark where I was like, oh my God, like these problems I've been having in my life that can't seem to shake, it's coming from me.
Yeah.
Realization.
It is. It's quite incredible, isn't it? It's like, it was honestly like somebody had switched something on in me. And when I look back, I can see over the years there were times when I was like, that doesn't seem right, and that doesn't seem right, and that doesn't seem right. But you kind of like get on with life. I was a single parent, I was trying to work and bring my child up, and you just get lost in the minutiae of life. But that time, my daughter had grown up and she'd moved away, and yeah, it was just like this big awakening. And I remember I went back to the UK to look after my mum, and I was going back there for 3 weeks, and I ended up staying for 5 months. And I started reading about, that was when everything, all the information came in. I'd bought myself a computer out from the payout, and it was like a portal. It was like a portal of information. And I was reading about 911, and I was reading about this, and you know how it is when you first wake up. Well, wake up, come away. Yeah. And it leads you. And I read about ayahuasca, and I was like, right, that's it. I'm selling the car. I'm going to Peru. I'm going to do ayahuasca. I never did that, but what happened was I joined Melbourne Against Chemtrails, and he's my friend. Well, we've lost contact now, but he saw my request and he thought I was in England, and he thought, oh, I'm not going to say yes because she's over in England. But he said to me afterwards, he said, something made me say yes. Then when I got back, I joined his orgone group. I met my friend Chris, who invited me to an ayahuasca ceremony. And I feel like I've just been literally, right, you're going that way now, and you're going that way now, and this now. I literally just feel that. And every time when you will have had these experiences where, you get a bit shaky and you think, oh, and then something happens and you feel, and you just realize, okay, I'm being guided. It's okay. I'm being guided. As long as you can reach that part of you within here and just silence all the noise and regulate your nervous system and find safety within, and you realize that you're being guided,
Yeah, I've definitely had that experience where I used to tend towards being a control freak. Still do a little bit, I'm not going to lie, but
Me too.
in the grand scale, like just in the way I approach life is so different now. I was always trying to control everything, and always I had so many expectations, and this was the outcome, and then when it wouldn't work out the way I wanted it, I would just spiral, and I'd be upset, and I'd be depressed and whatever. And I've had that experience of just letting go and surrendering, and to God, to universe, source, whatever people want to call it. But for me, it was to God, and then strengthening that connection with God, and knowing that I'm always held, and I'm always safe, and I'm always guided by that. And my life just completely transformed from there. And I actually wanted to ask you, Julie, because I'm curious, when you said you started sort of moving into more of the, like, from your nursing into more of the, like, the psychological side of things, did that reflect your own journey at all? Were you starting to look at that stuff in yourself, or not at that point? Was it not until you actually sort of left the medical industry?
Not at that point. When I started moving from the emergency side of things, it was a slow drip, Alexa. It was a slow drip. So when I look back on it, because hindsight is 20/20 vision always, and when I look back on it now, I realized that things were being shown to me, and I was having a deeper understanding about things. So my role, I moved from being a trauma nurse in the emergency department into what they called the hospital at risk program. And what we were doing is we were creating management plans for people who are frequently presenting to the emergency department with complex psychosocial issues, homelessness, so-called mental health. Yeah. Now, up until that point, I believed that it was mental health. But when I sat and started really talking to the people that I was talking to, I realized that they had the most horrendous of childhoods. And I began to realize that what they were doing was not an act of self-sabotage in a way of wanting to kill themselves. It was a way of these parts, now I know that they're parts, but it was a way of managing the pain, and then I began to realize that actually what I was doing, because my remit was to create these management plans, and I was networking and I was creating plans, but it became very apparent that's actually not what they wanted me to do. It wasn't actually what they wanted me to do. So I began to see that the way that the people who work in this system have got big hearts. Well, some of them have, up in the higher echelons. I question it sometimes, but on the lower echelons, if you like, there are big hearts wanting to do the best, but finding that the system won't allow it. And so it was my journey through that. I left the hospital, moved into homeless persons program, started case managing people, working with people with active drug and alcohol, really chaotic lifestyles. And then found myself, well, I've been homeless 3 times, but things have happened, and found myself in that situation of having a home, not having a job. My daughter had left, my relationship had finished. I was literally, it's like somebody had tipped me upside down and gone like this, and everything that I didn't need out and left that ground zero, if you like. Then started building up from there. And that's when I began to realize, I got into drug and alcohol nursing, then I went into drug and alcohol counselling, and that's when I realised that this was fundamentally trauma, and Australia is very behind, or was very behind, in acknowledging that trauma, and it's a hackneyed word now, because trauma, what does that mean? But it's our childhood experiences, our family experiences, our ancestral experiences and energy that comes down the family line, that actually then impacts how we are in this world, how we respond, how we react, how we are in this world. And so it's been a very gradual sort of realization that actually, you know, that it's more energetic than anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the reason I asked, and I'd love to get into it some more, like, where was that turning point for you where your own experiences started to really inform the work that you do with others? Because I know I've had that experience. A lot of people we've had on this podcast have had that experience in the work that they're doing now with people. A lot of it has been informed by their own experiences. And, you know, like what you said too, like, you really, like, when you look back, like I look back now and all the, you know, I suffered with depression from quite a young age and for many, many years, and, you know, went through the mental health system, and they just send you to a psychologist and it's talk therapy, and it didn't work. And I always say it's not that there's no place for talk therapy. It's just such a small piece of the puzzle, especially in terms of, like, when you're looking at, you know, the conscious mind versus the unconscious mind. Conscious mind's like 5%, and that's all that talk therapy is addressing. But yeah, I look back now too, and I'm just like, you're always being guided, even when you feel like you're not, because all those really, what I felt like were really horrible experiences have shaped me into who I am now, and have, like, now I look back and I'm like, I'm so grateful for those experiences, because now I can help others through that, because I've been there. Like, I fully understand it. It's not like, it's not like the psychologist sitting in an office that studied for 6 years and they're just giving you textbook stuff. Like, they haven't lived it. And if they have, in that setting, in that model, they're told not to, you know, you got to have the boundaries, the professional boundaries. And
totally, 100%. Well, Alexa, when I was 15, 16, I was anorexic. You know, I've done a lot of work around my parents. My mum probably would have been given the diagnosis, and I'm not one for labels or diagnosis. They're useful only in so much as that they can describe a set of symptoms that somebody is experiencing or exhibiting. So that's their utility. But to describe somebody as a BPD or you know, like anxious disorder or anything, is pathologizing our normal human experience. Now, when I was 15, I was anorexic. I stopped eating. My mum showed her love through feeding. When I realized that her experience was, her dad, my granddad, was a policeman in the war, in the Blitz in London. Now, I don't know what happened to her mum. I think her mum definitely wasn't at their wedding when my mum and dad got married. So she must have died young. So my mum didn't have a mother experience. She was evacuated as a 5-year-old to Wales and to live with her grandmother. The only other thing she said to me about her grandmother is that she hated her grandmother, hated her. So something horrible must have happened back there. But she lived with her grandparents in a cold miner's hut, 5-year-old away from her parents. That is developmental trauma right there. So that is what informed her as she grew up. Now, there was never any food, so she used to hoard food. She'd buy food even when, now I've got that trait as well. Ironically enough, I have that trait and I'm aware of it and I see it. And I know that it's not mine, it's coming from here because it's a form of control and safety. That's how she saw safety. And love to her was feeding because she wasn't fed. So she used to feed us. My only rebellion was to stop eating. I couldn't, because I was the family scapegoat. I could see it like it was. I could see the dysfunction. My dad was violent. My mum was emotionally abusive. Both of them were very damaged. I can see that it was now for what it is now. And I have huge compassion. That doesn't mean to say that I, like agree with what they did, but they were doing the best they could given the circumstances. But the way that affected me meant that I had to, like you were just saying, Alexa, control. I had to control. And the ultimate control was to control what I ate. And my mum took me to a psychiatrist and put me on Abilify. Nobody asked me what was going on. Nobody asked me. I was always overweight as a child and I was bullied. So I was spat on. I had rocks thrown at me. It was horrendous. And so I learned that my appearance, I was accepted through my appearance. As soon as I lost weight, I was attractive. And so it set me on a whole chaotic course. When I look back on my early 20s, I'm surprised I actually survived, to be quite honest, And so I've taken the drugs. I've been addicted to opiates. I've been on Effexor and come off. I was so dysregulated after my marriage ended as a single parent that I was having what I thought at the time, coming from a predominantly medical background, were epileptic fits. I was disassociating. I was getting tunnel vision. I was having intense deja vu. I would hear voices that weren't from my dreams. I'd see faces that, it was enormous. And I was diagnosed with idiopathic, meaning I don't know, oral lobe epilepsy. And I was on Tegretol and lamotrigine for years.
Wow.
And on Effexor and on Prozac. And so I've experienced that. Do you know what I mean? I know, I can't say I know what other people's experiences are like, but I've experienced that traumatic, that damage. Do you know what I mean? And that, so, and I came off those medications, and sometimes I think I'm a bit of a brick because I literally just came off them just like that.
Wow.
I just decided, I just stopped taking them. I just stopped taking them, cried. This was back in 2014 when my second relationship was breaking up. And I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried for 2 weeks. And then I was fine.
Wow.
But I didn't know that you weren't supposed to do that. I had no idea. And there was me working in the medical system. Do you know what I mean? So all those experiences, and I tell you that to say that all those experiences led me. And again, I was guided. It wasn't something that I grew up with. I had no idea about any of these sorts of things. I remember in 2014, I'd started this course, Masters in Social Change. And we went on a weekend away and everybody was talking about Rumi. And I hadn't even heard of Rumi at that stage. I didn't know who Rumi was. Do you know what I mean? But it literally catapulted me into, well, now it's been 15 years worth of self-exploration. And, I had several ayahuasca journeys, which opened me up to all sorts of things. I'm exploring, I'm reading the Bible at the moment. I'm reading it chapter by chapter by chapter, and I'm reading the Book of Enoch. So I'm just like, it's opened me up to so much. But what I find is with my clients is that the situations that they experience, I've had that experience. And also what's really interesting is that things will come up for me and I'll have to work through it. And then I'll have a client who's going through that. And so I've done that work. And so I can come from a position of, this is what helped me. So whilst I don't fully self-disclose, because I don't think that's helpful, because there's some sort of relationship that needs to be there between the counsellor or the therapist and the client. The client needs to know that you're a safe person and you're not going to dump all your nonsense onto them.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, you can disclose your experience to show that it is possible. And that's what I want everybody to know, that it is possible to move through this. And I've worked with people where it's been possible for them to move through this.
Yeah.
You know, they can make those changes in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the most important thing. And yeah, like I said earlier, that's what I found with therapists. It's almost like there's like this wall between you two. Like there's like none of that at all. And like, I totally agree, because you have to be, I mean, I would argue that it's even more important for people like us in this field to do the work ourselves, because you can't, you know, because most of the time too, if that's happening, it's an unconscious dumping, so to speak, or an unconscious transference. And so you got to be really careful of that. But yeah, I just agree. Like, and I know, like, just looking at the guests we've had on our podcast and the people that we listen to, the ones that have the most impact are the ones that have had those real life experiences. And quite often they've been quite severe. But I've said it many times on this podcast, and it's a big belief of mine in life, is that I do believe that our greatest challenges, when we do the work, become our greatest strengths. And that's the gifts that we have to offer to the world.
100%. I always see it as I'm walking beside somebody. Do you know what I mean? And it's like on my website that I really wanted to convey that sense of, you know, we find ourselves in the dark cellar, if you like, in the dark cellar of the house that is our body, if you like. And I like to say that I carry the torch for the person until they can carry it for themselves and light the way for themselves. And that's, you know, I've had many people come into my life, and still do. I still have, you know, my friend Cynthia is a huge mentor for me. You know, I have my mentors that I go to. Chris, you know, we share information and we talk, and what he's doing with his film. So we have our own mentors that we look to, and we become the mentors for other people. And I see it as a big chain, you know, like that we're all kind of like you know, the analogy where you're helped and you reach down and you help the person behind you. That's what we're doing. You can't appreciate somebody's experience if you haven't had that experience, not in its entirety. You don't have to have been sexually abused or have been beaten black and blue to appreciate that, but there does need to have been some appreciation of difficulty that you've worked through to be able to understand where somebody's coming from. And I think that's what we've got in the medical system, is that it's not their fault. They're trained that way. Having been through that training, you're trained not to give anything to the client, to the patient. Yeah. I mean, you know, when I was working down in one of the emergency departments down in the peninsula, well, it's Frankston, and the way that the system is set up, it's set up to divide. So the nurses resent the patients. Do you know what I mean? But that's because of what the system does to the nurses. They're exhausted, they're tired, there's not enough funding, there's not enough, you know, there's not enough space. And the poor people that are coming, in and looking for help, and they're not, we're literally it's a setup to be divided against each other. And of course, then when you feel divided, there's this barrier between you.
Yeah.
And they're trained to be professionals and not give anything away, you know? And there's, you know, I've not done a degree in psychology, but I know people who have, and a lot of it, it's really dry. It's reading out of books. It's not experiential. It's, you know, and it comes from a pathological background where human behavior and human emotions are pathologized.
Yeah.
You know, you used the word depressed. I would have used that word, but are we depressed? Or are we actually responding in an appropriate way to a really difficult situation in our life? There's a quote that's been attributed to to Krishnamurti, and he didn't actually say it like this, but the idea of it is that it's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Yeah.
And it isn't, it really isn't. And so I think that whilst we can look at that system and condemn it in the way that it is, I think our role is to show that there is a different way. There is a different way, and come at what we call mental health from the perspective of what happened as opposed to what's wrong.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, really like is it really to jump into the concept of the multi-generations, but because part of that was deep into my story as well with the negative relationship patterns. And it just blew me away that without my dad telling me about his first wife, I basically repeated that whole section of his life. It lasted over 12 years for him, lasted about 2 years for me, but with someone who was similarly, traumatized. I don't know the full story of their childhood, but described a lot of what you were describing about trauma. And there was, what was diagnosed as like bipolar, and then there was like schizophrenia and visions and voices. And later on, I found out from my daughter, who's not related to this woman, but was there, that there was like, that she was able to see an actual entity there in the room with us while we're kind of going, fighting or arguing. And it was very tumultuous, very traumatizing to my daughter. But now I'm explaining to her as I'm learning, it's not to like, it wasn't my fault. It's like, I'm owning all of it. In fact, I'm owning the generations before me that had experiences that contributed to the things that I would attract into my life, and then how I would respond to them.
100%.
Point where I can choose to let it continue or begin looking for the ways to release it.
100%. And the word that you use there is really important, is choice. A lot of people think that we have choice. Do you know what I mean? We think when we're in that situation, we think that we don't have a choice, but we actually do have a choice once we become aware of it. Once we become aware, and you're so right about, I'm about the generational aspect of it. I'm learning slowly, really slowly, family constellations. If I could just find the study.
Amazing.
But I use structural constellations in my work, which is fundamentally we're using, because I come from a perspective of internal family systems where we have parts, and our parts are there to protect us. And when people start to understand that part of us that does shout and scream and row and gets angry is there to protect us, it's doing a job. And so when we can see it from that perspective within ourselves, I can look at my mum and go, oh, you poor thing. You were just really, what happened to you, you didn't know any better. Now at the time, oh my God, I hated her. I hated my dad. I hated my mum. I was, like, my go-to was fight, flight. It was fight. And I would fight, and there was poltergeist activity around the place because of the energy that was being created through me. And when we realize that energy is being fed off, you know what I mean? It's literally been fed off and then recreated. That brings a whole new definition into the whole paradigm of what we're working with and how we appreciate what people are going through and what they're moving through. But, once we start the work, Isaac, with what you were just saying there with your daughter, once you start that work, the Iroquois Indians, they have that philosophy of when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations forward, 7 generations back. That generational trauma, when you map it on a genogram, I'm telling you now, you can see it coming down through the family line. I had a client yesterday, and when we were mapping out her genogram, I said to her, can you see that there is no possibility that there would have not been what was happening in your life? This is what has been programmed into your family line. And here you are in all your bravery, facing it, these horrible feelings, these painful feelings, these feelings of deep vulnerability, this crying, this pain, the experiences that you're having. This is this is, I'm going to get into one now because this is what I think is what's happening in the world. I think if you think about Genesis, right? God made the world, made us and made us out. He picked up the earth and made man. Now we can use that as mythology, that if that's a myth, some people take it seriously, literally, but I'm studying things through myth now. Now, if you think that we come from the earth, now what's happening at the moment, I feel, is we're going through a time of transition. The earth is moving and shaking. It's shaking off everything. It's coming up through us.
Yeah.
Moving through us as an energy. And anybody who is willing and brave enough and courageous enough, which is self-energy, which is who we really are, is courage, which is not the absence of fear. It's feeling it and doing it anyway with choice, like you said, Isaac. And this is what we're doing. Some of us are making the choice to feel it, to move it, to transmute it. And I use this as an analogy because this is what I feel is happening. Earthquakes, volcanoes, it's moving through us. It's moving through us. The tears, the shaking, the anger, it's all necessary,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I actually think that's part of the reason, it's very easy. Lots of people just want to blame, the COVID jab, that's what's killed everyone. That's why there's been such huge death rates. Yes and no, you can't deny that that's an aspect of it to some degree, but that's not the reason. I fully believe that through this transitional period, if you're not ready to, like you said, if you're not ready to feel what's coming up and deal with it and transmute it and grow and evolve, you're going to get left behind. And unfortunately for some people, that means that their life's not going to continue here on earth at this time. And I think that that's very necessary. We go through these natural cycles. And I know for me, that's I made that decision again. I made that choice where I was like, I'm going to do the work, because from the moment that I decided I want to have children, I was like, I don't want to pass on all this unconscious stuff. Now, that's not to say I'm not going to pass on anything. They're always going to carry all of our ancestral memory, and that's fine. I trust that they're going to be able to deal with whatever comes up for them in their lifetime. But having this knowledge, for me, I'm just I can't have this knowledge and not want to change things for not just for my familial line, but for the world, at large, because what we're going through right now, we can see it, we can feel it, people that are in these communities, we can feel the shift that's happening, and you can feel the frequency is changing on earth. And what a time to be alive, honestly.
I remind people of that. I have to remind myself, I don't know whether, I've read Joseph Campbell. Have you read Joseph Campbell's The Journey of Souls? Oh my word, have a read of that.
Write that one down.
Yeah. But and there's another one, Brian Weiss, as well. And they were basically working as a therapist and hypnotherapist with their clients, and they were moving people back through hypnotherapy, which is just focused attention. That's all therapy is. It's just focused attention back to their childhood and then back into past lives. And if what they say is true, we sign a contract, we have a soul group that we come through with the people, and I say to my clients, what happens if that person who caused you that most amount of pain, what happens if you were hanging around in the ethers, whatever, and they said, I'm going to do this. It's going to be horrible. But what will happen is you will learn this from this. If we don't do this, you won't learn this, Now, there's loads of people out there saying, oh, well, if there was a God, it wouldn't be like this. I don't know about any of that. But what I do know is, in my experience, in our experience as we are here now, is that how we think, how we act, the energy that we hold is what we will experience. It actually is. From my experience, even down to, if I start getting worried about not having enough clients and how am I going to pay my rent and what am I going to do? If I start thinking like that, my clients, I don't get clients, that it seizes up. Whereas if I just remember, okay, I'm trying to control it. I'm not in trust. I'm not in faith. Now, that's not to say that we don't do anything, because the New Age would just say we just sit back passively and manifest and it will all come to us. And that's nonsense as well.
Yeah.
We have to be in this. We have to be actively engaged energetically in this, you know, which means we take self-responsibility. We look at ourselves and we take responsibility for what we're doing in the world, how we are in the world, the things that we say, the things that we think, the things that we do. That informs our experience. When we're externalizing, when it's, you know, like I said to a client the other day, and we've probably all heard it before, you know, you point the finger out there, there's 3 pointing back at yourself.
Right.
The world is a mirror. That day when I heard that voice, the voice of God, you're fighting a mirror. It was so separate. It was so distinct that I knew that it wasn't just a thought. It was something that was being given to me. And then I immediately could see that my anger from my childhood, the anger that I carried around, because that's my go-to, do you know what I mean? That part of me protected me. It was needed back then, but now it doesn't need to work in that way. So how then can I use that part of me that's protecting me? How can I utilize and make friends with and be the parent for that part that I never had, and utilize that protector in a different way? So it's like transmutation, you know, is the transmutation of what we've been through, which is very necessary. We wouldn't be the people we were without it. And so how can we look at our life and not come from a place of blame and, you know, wishing it was different and bitterness and resentment? That'll be there. But how can we understand those feelings that we can move forward in a different way to create a different way of being for our children, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I love that you bring in parts work, because I think parts work is so crucial when it comes to any form of, self-exploration, self-healing, all of that, because as a first step, like for me, I know when I started learning that stuff and doing some of that work, it creates this separation where you don't identify as that part, because that's what so many people do. And even in the language that we use, like I've done NLP, like I'm certified in NLP, and I loved it because after I did that, I just remembered, like, you can't hear people speak like just without picking up on things anymore. And it's the language that we use. So I am this, I am angry. Yeah. I am so annoyed at this person. and it's like, that's a part of you that's, you know, coming online, so to speak. And it's the same thing as the nervous system states. Like just circling back to what you said before about like the labels, because I view it through a completely different lens now. Because I was diagnosed with depression, and then I was diagnosed at 20, that was at like 16. And then at 24 or 25, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2. And
you know, there's no such thing as bipolar 2, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I figured that out like long ago, yeah, because I went because I was at that time, I kind of like self-diagnosed, like looking up, and I was like, oh yeah, this kind of fits. And I had these really big ups and downs. Mind you, at that time of my life, I'd never dealt with this underlying mental health stuff. In adulthood, I just turned to drugs and alcohol and just numbed out all the time. Yeah. Of course, I was bipolar, like quote unquote bipolar, because my nervous system was just doing this all the time. Yeah. So ungrounded and so unregulated. And I got diagnosed. The psychiatrist said, like, in the next breath, basically said, oh, well, this is what we prescribe and you'll be on it for the rest of your life, basically. And I said, no, thanks. I said, that's like medication's a last resort for me. I'm going to do this the natural way. And at that point, you know, I had no idea about like this deep inner work and stuff. And so I just focused on like the physical stuff, the stuff that I did know about, which was like diet, nutrition, exercise, you know, just my physical body. And as soon as I did all that, never had quote unquote bipolar again. Like I just had the normal, like you said, like when things happen and you're just responding in a normal way. And the way that I see it now, because I also suffered with anxiety for a really long time, was that they're just different nervous system states. Like depression is you're in shutdown, and also just knowing your predisposition. Like my predisposition is to tend towards that. And again, when I look at my family line, it's there.
Yeah.
And then the anxiety is when you're in fight or flight, when you're so heightened and you're just up there all the time. And so that's how I see it now. These quote unquote mental health states they're just different nervous system states, and they're just telling you like what your body is responding to in your environment.
100%. Absolutely. 100%. You know, this is something that I talk with my clients all the time. And like, it was a big realization for me. Like I said to you, when I went into the emergency departments, I was drawn to that because of the chaotic nature of the emergency department. Do you know what I mean? But it was busy, it was stressed, it was frenetic. Now, my childhood was Beirut. That's what I used to describe my house. It was Beirut, And so my nervous system was set on fight, flight. I was on, if you like.
Yeah.
So my natural predisposition would be to fight and to be really just keep busy.
Yeah.
You said something there. Depression is the other end. It's collapse. It's
shut down.
Shut down, because we go through, our nervous system is there to protect us. It's to keep us alive, fundamentally. Now, if you think about the fact that when were in your mother, both of you, when you were in your mother's wombs, when your mother was in her mother's wombs, you were there too. So if you look at, say, like, what's happened to the human race through war. Now, we all know that war isn't because people hate each other. It's because it's financial, it's control. But if most people who've been through war will have that in their nervous systems, because coming down through the family line, that generationally, that energy is held in the body. Now, exercise increases endorphins. Endorphins increases serotonin. You know what I mean? And so therefore you improve your mood by increasing your own metabolic and hormonal state by doing exercise, nutritionally as well. The food that we're eating is poison.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
It's poison. Dr. Roger McFillin is a chap that I recommend people to follow. He's a clinical psychologist over in America, and he set up what they call the Conscious Clinician Collective, talking about the dangers of SSRIs and the pathologization of normal human behavior in response to abnormal, difficult situations, and how we're pathologizing people's natural responses. Once people become aware of what happened to them and why, and they start realizing that their body is designed to keep them safe. That's fundamentally what it's trying to do. It's designed to keep you safe. Once we have that realization of somatically what is happening in the body, we start eating better, we start drinking good water, what the importance of frequency in water and structured water and all that sort of business. Yeah. Once we start doing that to the physical, we have an energetic impact on the internal and our full experience. I think that's one of the most important things. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Alexa. Once you realized that the whole drug cycle as well, you take MDMA, cocaine, whatever it is, you're leaching your brain. It dumps dopamine into your receptors. Literally dumps all your dopamine. Yeah. No wonder for the next 2 or 3 days afterwards on the come down, you've leached yourself of dopamine. Mood is down. It's not bipolar. It's not bipolar at all. It's literally a response to the leaching of the dopamine, because the part of you that wanted to stay away from those uncomfortable feelings took something to help you feel better. And that's the chaotic cascade of feeling good, not feeling good, feeling good, not feeling good.
And even that's just a perfect example of the externalization, which I did, I think, and so many people do. We see it all the time. It's like this.
We all do until we don't.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this externalization of like, I couldn't make myself feel good, so I always had to. There was always like a substance that I had to take, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be sex, whether it be food. It was always something. Yeah.
And even like the medicinal, like psilocybin's getting really popular, and I had some profound shifts in perspective with it, using microdose and microdose plus, I would call it. But I noticed that same thing, dopamine, what I would describe as dopamine depletion. You get this nice, really good bump of like really good feelings. And then the next day you're like, oh, I want to do that again. Going through 100%. A shit period, I want to do that again. Then you do it again. And then there was a couple times where I took it and I was feeling a bit rough already, like kind of sad. And the sadness was trying to like speak. And I took that, and then it opened me up to let the sadness speak a bit more. And I was like, oh, like it does have that potential as well, to where it's not just a good feeling rush. It'll actually can potentially connect you deeper with that sadness, but you got to be careful with it.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not super crazy about using it now as far as like recreational or therapeutic, but I did have some profound shifts with it where I was able to disconnect, especially when I was having trouble with someone else's emotions that I kept reacting to, and then feeling what it felt like to not be triggered by that, and then choosing differently. But
I think everything, well, I'm going to be careful with what I say here. Not everything has a place, but things do have a place in our life. And there is a lot of discussion about psilocybin assisted therapy. I think it has a huge place as long as it's guided, and as long as what you've just highlighted there, we're not using it to bypass or to rely on, because the work has to come from within. So I wouldn't say to somebody necessarily don't use psilocybin, but go into it with the awareness of why you're using it, how you're using it, what you're doing it for, who you're doing it with, all those sorts of things. Street drugs, you know, I can see why people use street drugs. I mean, I remember a young man when I was working as the overdose prevention nurse. I mean, what a ridiculous, that's what I used to say. I said, I'm not preventing overdoses. I'm fundamentally pimping for the pharmaceutical companies, Narcan. That's all I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's just literally, if I was preventing overdoses, what I'd be doing is I'd be sitting to them and saying, what happened? What happened to you that there's a part of you that feels that it needs to take you out? That's a protector. It's a vagal collapse, it's disassociation. It's a part that wants to take you out because it sees that as a way of not feeling.
Yeah.
We've been inculcated to believe that our feelings are the thing that we need to get away from. Everybody, this is not, and in no way is this a kind of an insult on people or trying to degrade anybody, but we're all comfort seeking. That's what we do. We comfort seek.
Programmed to do that.
100%. And so we'll do anything to stay out of pain. We'll do anything. Like it will, even to the point of actually ending our own lives to stay out of pain. The real bravery, the courage comes from being with that pain. And given the fact that, you know, a feeling, well, it's like I used to say to my clients who are coming off drugs, or I still do actually, you know, we call it urge surfing in drug and alcohol counselling. So an urge comes, and now an urge will be there for 90 seconds. That's it. And if you can be with that feeling of desperation or that feeling, the mind will want to make meaning of what's occurring in the body. It wants to make meaning of it. Oh, this feeling means that I'm nervous. This feeling means that I'm scared. This feeling, whatever. That's even if you're aware of it. Do you know what I mean? But if you can just be with that sensation, sit, hold, be with your breath. And it takes a lot of resourcing. It takes a lot of work to get to that point. But if you can be with that, those feelings, those sensations, they'll come and they'll go. And having the feelings, crying, shaking, roaring, you know, whatever it is, having the feelings, moving that energy out and through, you'll realize that you're not taken over by it. You're not sunk by it. It's not going to take you out. It's the fear of the feeling that continues the behaviors. It's the fear and so many people are being put on medications now. I mean, like, you know, 7-year-olds on Ritalin.
I know, it's ridiculous.
I mean, what are we talking about here? I've got 2 clients who were put on Ritalin when they were 7, young boys. No child is supposed to sit in a desk all day long listening to an adult.
Right.
You can't do it. So you've got this child who's fidgeting, wants to get out there and play. And because we've got this restrictive system, the child needs to be controlled. So they're put on Ritalin. Their little brains are developing on amphetamines. Ritalin, Adderall, all those are one chemical molecule away from methamphetamine.
Wow.
That's insane that they do that to children. Yeah.
And then they have a drug-induced psychosis. So they're out. And then they go to a psychiatrist and they're put on olanzapine or antipsychotics. And that's it. That's it. They're in the system. They're in the mental health system. They're called schizophrenic and psychotic on really strong, powerful antipsychotics, really strong, powerful SSRIs and tranquilizing drugs, you know, like sedative drugs.
Mm.
And that's it. And so I've got these clients who that's what happened to them. That's what happened to them, and they're in the psychiatric system. And it takes a lot to get away from those drugs. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And what I was going back to what I was saying about Dr. Roger McFillin, he's a clinical psychologist who started this conscious collective warning people and giving informed consent, you know. And that was one of the things back in when the nonsense was happening and I lost my job, you know. My manager said to me, would you be willing to tell your clients to take the injection? I went, no. No.
Got to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. And she said, why? And I said, because I can't give informed consent. I can't tell them because nobody knows what this is. So informed, I mean, once people are informed, they can make their own choices, and then they can start the journey, whatever journey that they want to do. And sometimes, you know, I mean, I could go on, just go on about this, but sometimes that might be their journey.
Yeah.
That might be their fate. You know, in family constellations, we have to honor the fate of the person, and we have to help in harmony. You know?
Yeah.
Doing here.
Well, yeah, pharmaceutical drugs, that's, I've got to say, like, thank God, you know, because that's my background is my mum looked into vaccines. Like, I was vaccinated until about 4.5 years old. She stopped me, and my brother's never had a vaccine in his life. And that was kind of, you know, I would say for my family, our first awakening experience to, like, we always, like, I grew up knowing about Big Pharma. We never, you know, medications were a last resort. We didn't, and of course, like, we still went to the doctor. We would kind of go to the doctor to get diagnosed for whatever. I used to get ear infections as a kid, whatever. And then my mum would go, we'd get the diagnosis, and we go off to the homeopath and say she's got this. I'd have a consult with a homeopath. They'd give me the homeopathic remedies, and I'd be fine. But yeah, I just, when you're altering your body's chemistry, and because we had Jerry Marzinski on recently.
Oh yeah, I've spoken to him.
Yeah, he's great. And, you know, when they're making these pills, these medications based on the false presumption that there's a chemical imbalance in the body, which it absolutely is not. That's such a load of rubbish. That was one of the things that I learned, early on, like in my experience. I was like, because I used to think that, because that's what I was told with my depression. Oh, it's just a chemical imbalance. And then I think around the time I started studying nutrition, I was like, this is absolute rubbish. It's not a chemical imbalance. And if it is, it's not in the brain, because all of those hormones are created by the gut bacteria in the gut. Anyway, but and of all the drugs, like of all the, like, drugs, alcohol, all the stuff that I took in my 20s during that period of time, the worst experience I had in terms of like abusing it and also how I would feel after were prescription pills. So I used to take Xanax, like, recreationally. And I would do things completely blacked out where I was fully functioning and no memory whatsoever. Like, I'm talking driving. There was like a huge incident at a bar with someone that I don't remember. Like, it was so bizarre because I watched myself on CCTV and I wasn't conscious. Like, it was so bizarre. And that's when, after those experiences, I was like, I fully believe that there's black magic that goes on with pharmaceutical drugs. That's a whole, that's a whole other rabbit hole, because to be fully functioning and have no conscious memory, like, something's inhabiting your body and it's not you.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh my word. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why I think, like, you know, I just don't think, like, you know, it's up to everyone. I'm pro-choice. You choose what's right for you. But I don't think that prescription medication, long-term prescription medication, benefits anyone.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not. You know, I'm really glad that you brought it up, because I had conversations with Jerry Marzinski, because when I heard him, and I was actually in a podcast with him, but it never came out. But I heard him talking and I thought, oh my God, somebody thinks the same way as I do. So I got in contact with him. Through my experience of working with people in the drug and alcohol space, working in the emergency departments of people coming in into under the influence of all sorts of drugs, meth being the one most recently, you know. And it's really interesting, just as an aside, when I started my nurse training, when I started in the emergency departments in 1987 back in England, emergency departments were accidents and emergencies. There were builders with cuts and, you know, tummy problems and back pains and head injuries and that sort of thing. Not very many drugs and alcohol, not at all. Now, 8 years later, when I was in the emergency department at Brighton, drugs, alcohol. It was and now its majority is drugs and alcohol. Now, I became really aware of the way that meth was affecting people. And I just thought, there's some dark magic in this. There's some really dark magic in this. Now, I don't believe that it's cooked up in you know, places. Maybe now sometimes it is in meth labs, but I believe that that recipe came from somewhere very dark and has been deliberately put out there.
For sure.
I believe that there are spells that are created over these drugs when they're manufactured, the pharmaceutical medications. I fully believe it. I've seen people, the way that they change, one olanzapine, their color goes gray. They're completely not there, terrified, absolutely terrified. There was and you know, that experience you had with Xanax, there's a sleeping tablet that I used to take when I was on night duty, and I can't remember what it was called.
It still knocks.
Still knocks. I literally would take still knocks and I would not be aware of what I was doing. I'd be in the kitchen eating saladas with butter on them and eating, talking, saying absolute nonsense. My friend who was an ambulance driver had to literally put me to bed because I would not go to bed, and I have no recollection. And you're absolutely right. If we're not inhabiting our body, if we're not energetically there, something else is. And that's why we've got to maintain a really good, strong, energetic boundary around us, because trauma creates holes in our etheric and astral bodies, and that's where these spirits do get in. And I've talked to people with schizophrenia. Do you know what I mean? I've spoken to them, and it's not their thoughts. They're not real. There are a pattern to them. They do say things that aren't, you know, like coming from the client. They literally do. And so the psychiatric system will say, I had a GP say to me the other day about an NDIS client that I've got, it's just his schizophrenia. I said, no, it isn't. He's frightened. He's terrified. He's not listened to. Nobody talks to him. Nobody gives him any benefit of the doubt. Nobody hears what his story is. It's not his schizophrenia, you know. And you see these signs, you know, when you go into like places like, well, if you're unlucky enough to have to go into places like Santall or any of these places, and it says our staff deserve to be treated with respect. And I always ask myself, well, what are you saying? What are you doing that's creating this energy that these people then feel the need to defend themselves in that way? And there's an energy in these places. There is an energy that permeates in these places that's one of division. And I can guarantee you that the majority of people who work in these places are taking some sort of pharmaceutical, antidepressant, or some sleeping tablet or Valium. That's the energy that they're carrying around in them. It's what they're introducing, that energy through the pharmaceuticals, through the street drugs. And, you know, you've got the media saying, you know, don't take this drug. You're a bad person. If you take heroin, meth, you're a horrible person. But take this drug instead.
Exactly.
You know, it's okay to prescribe Ritalin to your 7-year-old son because it calms them down. But if you said to the parent, that's one molecule away from methamphetamine, and you're setting your son up or your daughter up for an amphetamine addiction later on in life, because their brains, their little neurological brains are developing with that drug in there. You know what I mean? What do they think is going to happen? You know, it just makes me like, I get really.
I'm with you. I mean, doctors are just legal drug pushers. That's the only difference, is that it's legal for them.
Oh my God. I got in trouble once for actually saying to a mother and a daughter came in, and the daughter was heroin addicted.
Wow.
And I was in that overdose prevention nurse nonsense role. And I was obviously giving them the options, you know what I mean? And I was teaching the mother to inject makeup and inject the Narcan so that she could potentially save her daughter from overdosing.
Wow.
And we were talking about methadone. Now, methadone it's the opiate replacement for heroin, and that's what heroin people are put onto when they're trying to come off heroin, but it's actually swapping their addiction. And the only difference is that the government are their dealers, not the man on the street. And I actually said that. I said, look, you can go on methadone. It would make your you wouldn't be addicted to heroin, but you'll be addicted to methadone. And the only difference is that your dealer is the government. That's it. And she put a complaint in about me.
Oh, wow. Far out. It was worth it, Julie. It was worth it.
Yeah. I mean, some people aren't ready to hear it, and that's fair enough. Do you know what I mean? But I'm never, ever, ever not going to tell you what the truth is. And it's got me in a whole lot of trouble before as well. But that's why I was the scapegoat of the family. I was putting it out. If you didn't do that, that would, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank God for people like you, though. That's like, if everyone was like that, it might be a little bit much, but I think it's super critical to have a sprinkling of such people. Alexa's a lot like that with as far as seeing things and pointing it out, but having people that can just cut through all the bullshit, see it, call it out, almost without a second thought of like, oh, should I? Because there's so many people that probably see it, but they have that filter like, oh, should I say something? Oh no, I don't want to like rock the boat. And that's like an epidemic of that kind of inaction or fear or being frozen.
Well, it's wanting to be liked. It all stems back again from when we were children. Do you know what I mean? Don't stand out for the crowd. We all want to be liked. We all need to feel part of the tribe. Being isolated from the tribe is a huge fear. The Inuit, the Eskimos, what they'll do if somebody in their community does something wrong, they don't put them in jail or punish them in that way. They give them everything that they need to survive, and they send them off. Yeah. And they what's it called? Discommunicate and
excommunicate.
That's the word. Yeah. Excommunicate them from. Now that is death, especially when you're living in that sort of environment. If you're on your own, then that is death. It's worse. And we all know that people who are socially isolated, who aren't part of a community, that creates real deep disconnection and sadness within them. And what have we got? We've got a society that we're being funneled into disconnection and being separated from each other, which then again creates this feeling within that nobody loves me, because this is a childhood program that's come through, because that's what we've believed and that's what we've been told. And so it's like this snowball that it's like a juggernaut, and that's like what I recognize is like a juggernaut barreling through people's generational trees, if they're their ancestry. And at some stage of the game, somebody has to stop it. Somebody has to say, no, this goes no further. I'm changing the whole of the 7 generations back so that 7 generations forward. And that's where we're at the moment. The work that you're doing, the work that so many of the people that you've interviewed are doing, all of us in different ways are serving to change what has happened before. I can't even say that we can blame the Faucis or the bloody Bill Gateses or the...
That's a trap too.
It is.
Same thing. It's just pointing the finger of blame so that you don't have to take responsibility for your part of whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah, it takes radical self-responsibility, and it is horrible. It's horrible to do that work. I've sat in front of my counsellor and recognized the parts of myself that have created something, like where I've been in victim, and nobody wants to be. I mean, I was listening to a podcast yesterday. I use the Cartman's drama triangle a lot. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh, yeah. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants to be the victim. Nobody does. But we move in and out of victim, perpetrator, rescue all the time until we don't, until we realize that actually it's okay to say, when I hear you say that, there's a part of me that feels sad. And what I really would appreciate, and what I really need from you is whatever it is, being vulnerable, we don't want to be vulnerable, because when we were little, being vulnerable was dangerous. Yeah. It was dangerous unless we had really, well-sorted parents who done that work on themselves and how securely attached themselves, and recognize that a child just needs to have their feelings unconditionally loved, and allow those feelings to be there without any judgment. But a lot of us carry around the program that feelings are bad. So, you know, a baby cries, our association to crying is, oh, that's a bad thing. And so we try and stop the baby from crying. So even then, at that young age, energetically, we're picking up on the idea that my feelings aren't acceptable. I can't have my feelings. And so there's a whole market now of, going back to what we were talking about in pharmaceuticals, of shutting down your feelings.
Yeah.
You know, shutting them down. Don't show them. Don't show anybody that you're vulnerable.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier, and it's like, it's one of those situations where I totally agree. And then I also see, like, man, I've lived both and the opposite. And I'm wondering what you might say about this. So the idea that we're all, well, you know, big overhead, you know, arching statement, we all are comfort seeking. And as humans, that's true. Like, if it's cold, I want to be warm.
Yeah.
But I also found through my life, and I didn't grow up, you know, largely traumatized. I mean, I was the youngest of four boys. You know, there's different ways. I mean, people, you can, you know, define things as traumas, you know, down to the smallest degree. But
yeah.
I grew up seeking hardship, and I grew up creating situations that were very difficult in order to overcome them, where I would put on, like, simple things, like just challenges and tests. Like, I wanted to be tested. I wanted to be challenged. You know, I would ride, used to do BMX bike, you know, dirt jumping and stuff. And if we got smashed in the shin with the pedal on the bike and it cut us open, it hurt like nothing else. But we'd go in and be like, look, Mom, look what I did. And, like, you know, boy stuff.
Hey.
And I took that to a bit of an extreme, you know, going into the military and pushing myself to, you know, overcome breathing difficulties by exercise and, like, just kind of cut loose from limitations and finding that limitation, but seeking difficulty to overcome it. And I don't know if that's a pattern that you've seen with people with, you know, any kind of like generational trauma, or if that's, because I think there's a utility to that, to where that's part of an energy to overcome what gets people trapped into addictions and everything else, where they just want to be numbed out, where they just want to be comfortable, where they don't want to do anything difficult or change or let go. But if you actually seek the difficulty and are willing to face up to it and make that kind of what you do, your part of life, it's like you're almost, you know, more resilient in the face of all that.
100%. You know, I mean, if you were my client and if that was a problem, you'd sit down and I'd explore, well, what was it about the difficulty that was, you know, that, what did it give you? What did it give you? And it's a sense of empowerment. Young men naturally go through that process of pushing the envelope to the limit. It's part of their psychological process of some people's psychological process of moving through and integrating the masculine and the feminine. Do you know what I mean? There's a great myth of Parsifal and the Fisher King and the Holy Grail. And it talks about the need for a young man to go out there and challenge himself, because that is the leaving of the mother. The Parsifal wears the homespun garment. That homespun garment in the myth, it represents the mother's love. And the young man has to go out into the world and fight the Red Knights to find the Holy Grail, to integrate the inner masculine and inner feminine within themselves. So that seeking of challenge, I mean, the fact that you go back to your mum and say, look what I've done, is that safety seeking. You're going out there, you're challenging yourself. That's what you're supposed to do as a young man. Go out there and challenge yourself. And it can be used in a positive way. And this is where we come down to the difference between this black and white thinking. One thing's all good, one thing's all bad. You use that energy of challenge, of challenging yourself to overcome, for a positive experience. It gave you resilience. It made you stronger. You had a purpose behind it. You know, you said something about breathing difficulties there. So for you, it was a healing journey. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to test myself. I'm going to make it happen. Now, on the flip side of that, there's the going out into the world and young men who speed or use drugs to a certain extent or do dangerous things. They're doing the same thing. They're challenging themselves, but it's coming from a place of pain. It's coming from a place of distracting themselves away from pain, whereas you are moving into it and meeting it and overcoming it. So it's the same sort of energy behind it, but it's the same sort of actions, if you like, the challenging of oneself, but it's the energy behind it, the purpose behind it. You were doing it to resolve something, to heal, to grow. You could see that was testing your boundaries, to grow strength. It's rather like going to the gym and lifting heavy weights and challenging yourself to build that muscle of resilience and resourcefulness. Or that can be put into self-destructive, of getting away from the feelings of anger, of hurt, of the messages that have gone in, you're no good. I mean, obviously you had a supportive, you said that you didn't actually have what you'd call overt trauma. There's tiny little bits. Our parents aren't perfect. They do things that aren't beneficial for us as children. That's not their fault. So we all have that as an experience. But for you, because you had safe parents, they were there. They were safe. They were creating safety between them. They were creating that secureness so that the child wasn't constantly looking to see, are they there? Are they there? Are they going to be safe for me? But you had the confidence to be able to look out into the world knowing that they were going to be there for you. Now, not a lot of children have that experience. If the parent themselves has been traumatized and they're not able to resource themselves and they don't experience safety, their dysregulation is then transmuted to the child, So you've got a child who goes to his parent for safety, and the parent's like distracted because there's poverty, because they've had bad childhood experience themselves, there's domestic violence, there's war, there's whatever else is distracting them, and the parent hasn't got the attention. And so the child learns, I can't go to that parent. Now, that's a real dichotomy for a child, because the parent represents safety, but at the same time, it's the terror that they're trying to get away from. What does a child do? And they call it structural disassociation. What does a child do? I need you, but you terrify me. I need you, but you terrify me. And that then in the world, when a child moves into the world, they'll experience that in their world. In their relationships themselves. They'll want that relationship, but they're terrified of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about narcissism and narcissists and psychopaths and sociopaths, Now, this isn't to say that what they do is right and that we should just understand all of them and love them, because there's nuance there as well. But what we have to realize when we're in relationship is what part of that is me? What did I contribute to that situation? And if we're experiencing somebody who's what we call narcissistic, well, is it a real narcissism? First and foremost, we have to look at ourselves first of all. And if it is, get the fuck out. Excuse my French, get out,
That's fine.
But if it isn't, if we're not looking at where we're contributing to that and not taking responsibility for ourselves, we're not going to be able to change that situation. Does that kind of like, do you see what I'm saying there? How it's all the same thing. It's how we use it, it's how we see it, how we've used it in our own life, what we've experienced in our childhood.
Yeah. Well, and can I just say too, because I love that I was going to pop it in and then I was like, no, I'm going to wait to see what you say. And I love that you touched on the masculine, feminine, because my understanding of that, and we've spoken about this, because I read something not too long ago, and it was basically just a little tidbit on how your relationship with your mother impacts you, like the areas, and then how your relationship with your father. And your relationship with your father, one of the aspects that is like the biggest impact is risk taking. And Isaac and I've had this conversation on like his experience and the way he goes through life like that. He's very comfortable taking risks, which for the masculine, I think is really important, because I think that is more like, generally speaking, women aren't huge risk takers, and I don't think we're meant to be. And it was just really interesting reading that, because I remember, I was reading it reflecting on my relationship with my parents. And my dad's never been a huge risk taker. My parents, and they're of a different generation too. So they just worked their guts out, got married, had kids, bought the house, like this very safe, we're just going to stay in the walls here. And, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just reflecting on, and not just me, my brother as well. I'm like, yeah, we're not huge risk takers. And that comes from that. So the way that I see Isaac is, I'm like, yeah, I think that not only does he have a healthy role model of the masculine, I think he hit the nail on the head. And obviously knowing his family, they have created a lot of safety in their family unit. And especially for boys, like there's 5 kids, 4 boys in Isaac's family. There is a lot of that, masculine energy, that boy energy. And I think you guys, felt very safe to express that because you guys were always out hurting yourselves.
And it's passed down. Like my dad, later in life, after he started having kids, wanted to erase risk. Like I think he wanted to roll the time back. But if you go back into all the stories he tells us growing up, he was taking risks left and right. Like it was in his DNA, and he definitely passed that energy down to us.
Well, so you learned it. You learned that it's okay to take risks. But, it's interesting because there's a book, and I can't remember about who it's by now, but it's called The Second Mountain. And so from a male psychology perspective, the first sort of 40 years, and it's not a cliche, well, it's a cliche that men go through a midlife crisis in their 40s. Do you know what I mean? But for the first part of your life, it's men want to provide. They would need to provide. That's what they do. And they thrive off being recognized for that provision. Now, feminism has not done any favors for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Whilst I'm not saying that all women should be tied to the kitchen sink, because if that was the case, I wouldn't have survived. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I am saying is, and my experience, my daughter is a apprentice carpenter, right? It's been bloody hard work for her. She's 34. The last 4 years she's been an apprentice carpenter. It's hard work. Her body isn't built for it. She doesn't have the muscle mass. We bleed every month. Yeah. We have hormonal changes that men just don't have. Men have a lot of testosterone. Women do too, and that's our drive. Men have a lot more testosterone, which gets you out there. That first mountain is you establishing yourself in the world as a man, setting your boundaries, testing your limits, providing, getting the job, or creating the farm, or whatever it is that you're doing. That's the first part of your life. Then comes the point in life, and I've got a couple of clients who are doing that at the moment. They're questioning. It's rinse and repeat. I'm bored. I don't feel fulfilled. So we're looking at values. We're looking at, the second mountain is self-fulfillment. It's okay. So I've done this now. So that's where your dad was. He took his risks. He was out there. He provided safety. He was a masculine man. He gave you the opportunity to go out there and explore yourself fully, fall off a bike, hurt yourself, know that it wasn't going to kill you. And that's going back to where we are with children, with, the helicopter parents now who love their children so much they don't allow them to take risks.
Yeah.
They won't allow them to take risks. And that in and of itself is a trauma, if we want to put it in those terms, from a neurological perspective, because a person then doesn't believe that they can actually do something for themselves because they were protected. That makes somebody avoidant of their own emotions, if we want to call it from an attachment perspective. Now, going back to my daughter and her work as a carpenter and doing the work that she's doing, and I said to her, when she's beating herself up over the fact that she gets things wrong and she can't do it and she's exhausted, and I'm like, you're not built for this. It's fantastic that you're doing it, and all power to your arm for actually doing it, because she's an artist and she wants to do it because she wants to help build sustainable housing, and she uses the skills in her art and construction and all this sort of business.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm so in awe. She had her own business as a massage. She was a holistic massage therapist, and then she went into doing carpentry.
Yeah. Wow.
With the artist over the top of it, it's her art. But watching her do that And the anxiety that it's produced in her because she's not feeling good enough and comparing herself to men who are completely, it's a different ball game. Men are completely different. I mean, it's been an interest. We've had some laughs over the things that she's told me about the men that she's worked with, about mansplaining, like men.
We can't help it.
No, but and I've said to her, I said, men want to provide.
Yeah.
And, if we don't want to create division, I said, you might feel annoyed that they're trying to explain things to you. I said, what do you do in that situation when they're trying to explain things? And she had a bit of a laugh because she said there was one time where this chap was trying to show her about a straight line. And he was going, yeah, you just need to put the ruler there. And she was going, oh, so you mean I put the measuring tape there? And he goes, yeah, you just put that there. And so she was subtly ever so subtly and I said, can you see what was happening there though? If you'd have got all angsty about that, if you'd have been defensive about that, if that part of you had believed I'm wrong, I'm getting it wrong, he's telling me off, there would have been division there. But what you did is you could see that he was so lost in, and he just wants to help. He was providing help.
Yeah.
But it's how we then perceive that. And that's where, again, going back full circle again, is how do we learn about where we've been hurt, what we believe that we're experiencing, how do we turn in, first of all, and meet that need for ourselves, regulate our nervous system, so we regulate our emotions, so that we're creating peace as opposed to war and them against us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Doing that division piece. And yeah, thank you for sharing that and being like honest and reflective and opening that, because that's not an easy thing for women to come to terms with, especially in this day and age with all the conditioning and all that stuff. And I also think it's valuable that she's going through this and seeing it firsthand. Like that firsthand experience speaks volume. Like when she goes and shares it, or when you go and share it, versus some woman who just has been accepting all the Netflix programming and all that, and just thinks, yeah, we can do anything. Like,
well, it started long before Netflix, let me tell you. I always say it. I'm of the
course.
Spice Girl generation. It was all girl power and female empowerment, and I was fully indoctrinated to that. Like I always say it, like just even sort of 5-6 years ago, I would get so triggered by stuff like these kind of conversations around like what women can do and men and being equals. And actually Isaac and I just had this conversation the other day about this men and women are equal thing. And there's so much nuance to even just that term, because, what I said the other day was that I don't think that it's not that neither is above the other.
100%.
You know what I mean? But in terms of like equal, as in the same, no, we're meant to be different. We have different functions. We have different roles. Like even if you just want to talk about our physicality, you know, and then you've got all the energetic stuff, we're not meant to be the same. So why can't we just own that and be comfortable in that? But that's what the feminist movement has done, has created this, well, women can do anything that men can do. And it's like, that's literally not true. I can't lift heavy shit like Isaac can lift. Like I can't. And most women can't. Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I said to Charlotte, when she's beating herself up and she's standing on top of a roof and it's freezing cold and she's trying to hammer nails in and she's got a period. I'm like, you go and ask the men if they've got, are they bleeding? Is their energy literally being sucked out of them? Is there hormonal balance all over the place that affects your thinking? Actually affects your physicality? You feel weak? There's no accident, is it, Alexa? Have you read The Red Tent? Have you ever read the book The Red Tent?
No.
Oh my word. Oh my word. Read that book.
A whole list after our chat.
It's such a good book. The Red Tent. It's a beautiful story, but fundamentally what it's saying is that women and it's set back in biblical days, really. When women bled, they went into the red tent. They bled together, they weaved, they talked. They were the ones who brought the wisdom to the community. The men would look after the children, the grandmothers, and who'd had their time. and the grandfathers, they'd be the ones who are looking after the community, while the women went into the red tent and drew their energy in. Now, that's one thing that I never learned. You know, I'm 60 now. If I'd have known the significance of my periods and my menstruation and my bleeding time and the power that we have as women when we draw that energy in and we sit with that energy, that's our power. Men have a different power. It doesn't mean to say, like you just said very well, we're not, and this is part of what's happening in society at the moment. There's a sticker on the bin in Cockatoo where I live, and it says equality or something, you know, like all this equality, diversity nonsense. We're not equal we're equal as human beings.
Yes. Yeah.
As our presence.
Yeah.
Not in our physicality, not in our emotions, not in our energy. We offer different things that are just as powerful as men offer. And if we can learn to live together in that way, that we complement each other, it's not about being subservient to a man. It's not at all. And if we're subservient to a man, that's because we've got parts of ourselves that please because something happened to us when we were little that we didn't feel as if we deserved love. I've been there. Yeah. I didn't get love. My dad was violent. He was scary. So subsequently for me, men were scary or I'm contemptuous of them. You know, that was my wounding. My mum was deeply contemptuous of my dad. My dad was scary. So I had this. And what did I do? Went out and had relationships with the most, you know, inappropriate of men because that's what love looked like. And why I needed to be validated. You know, a childhood abuse, being bullied, you know, for me, love and validation came through if I was attractive and if I was wanted, you know. And when women understand that we are just as powerful, and if we love ourselves and putting ourselves in the red tent and honoring that part, honoring that aspect of ourselves, you know, if we honored ourselves, men would honor that, and there would be, can you imagine corporations saying, all right, you got a week when you're bleeding, you go into the red tent. We don't expect you to be part of the workforce. How many women how many times have you gone to work? I've gone into night duty, bleeding and exhausted and not being able to think straight, you know?
Exactly. And it's funny because like you're saying, you didn't know this. I wasn't raised like that. And I've had such a huge transformation around that in the last couple of years, especially actually since meeting Isaac, because I started going through this, like really learning more about the masculine, feminine, and realizing at the beginning, very early on in our relationship, realizing that I've been in my masculine for most of my life.
100%.
Yeah. And that's just one aspect of it, is this conditioning that we can just do everything that men can do. We can work full time. We can, not have any time off to honor our body and honor, because for most women, I mean, I used to work, the last company I worked for was, I think the only men we had working in our company were in head office, and it was maybe one or two, and it was a company full of women. And I used to work in a clinic with like 7 or 8 women. And, and of course, you know, you sync up and stuff, but it was always like, oh, I got my period today. And the way I used to speak to my body about that, I literally used to say, oh, I hate my uterus. Like,
yes.
And I would have really uncomfortable periods, but that's because also, instead of like now on usually like, the first couple of days, especially, I will naturally feel more, I don't want to go out. I don't want to like exert myself. And so I stay home. Yeah, I stay home and I just honor that. And, a lot of the time I'm still working, but just at the computer or whatever. But it's just honoring that. And my relationship with my body has changed so much through even just that one aspect. And it does, I think it perpetuates this, a lot of this self-loathing and like for women, and that we're not good enough because we can't keep up with men, and we're not meant to.
Exactly. And once that as a message gets through to little girls, it's not so much that you can't do what a man does. You can do whatever the hell you like. Do you know what I mean? But understand there's these differences, and how do you honor them? How can you love those parts of yourself that aren't the same as men? Otherwise, like you said, we're literally turning against ourselves. We cast spells upon ourselves. Do you know what I mean? It's that I hate going back to what we were saying at the very beginning, you know, like the identification with I am angry. I hate my uterus. I am my back pain, my period pain, my sore throat, my MS, my migraines, my. We own that. We become it. It becomes a persona, and that's exactly what we are then. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to, like you said, separating it a little bit. Yeah. What would it be like to be able to say, I'm bleeding this week, I need to take time, and that be okay?
Yeah.
You know, I'm alongside you there. All my life, I've been in the masculine energy. I've had to be, you know. I didn't even know what that even meant, you know, when somebody says to me, although I was talking, you know, Georgina Grace, which she did my numerology, and I'm a 303 like her.
Yeah.
And I'm
actually, same as me, Julie. I'm a 303 too. Yeah.
And you're a self-projecting projector as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm a self-projecting projector as well.
Amazing.
Can I just say, I know so many we're only like 2 to 3% of the population, and I'm like collecting them. I know so many self-projector projectors.
Yeah. I'll be really interested in talking to you about that more in depth after at some stage, because you do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But she was saying to me, we were talking about that I've made it a mission to be more in my feminine. When I started that, what does that even mean? She said, well, you're a 303. You don't even know it. There is no, so you can't be in like your feminine. Do you know what I mean? Because it doesn't make sense to you. But from that sort of perspective, and I can't remember what she said now. I've gone on a ramble and I've said something and I can't finish it now because I can't remember what she said.
About like being in the masculine, you realize you were also in your masculine for a long time and then you didn't even know what that meant. And then
no idea what the feminine meant. No idea what the feminine meant. But what she was saying to me is something about 303 and the emotions, and that 303s don't feel that in the same way, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't be in our feminine aspect. And I learned from another lady who's in Chris's film, actually, is a friend of mine, Prasanna. I did a course with her, and she was talking about the feminine, about being receptive. And I thought, yes, now that makes sense. I can see that my energy was like Isaac's energy as a man, going out into the world and out there and grasping and doing, and no wonder I was exhausted. It was going absolutely against what the feminine energy is supposed to do, is to receive. Now, that's not to say that we sit completely in one or the other, because we both have the anima and the animus within us. Do you know what I mean? And that's what we talk about, integration, where we use those aspects of ourselves. And this comes down to knowing ourselves. You know, it's about knowing ourselves. Where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Or where the thing, I mean, it's not even a weakness. Where can I grow? Where are my limitations? And that's not to say that that's wrong. It's like, that's not my strength. So how do I accommodate with that and be with that, as opposed to beat myself up about it, that I can't do it? And this is what I say to my daughter all the time, you know. She made a set of steps. I mean, honestly, she won't listen to this because she doesn't sometimes go down the same thought process, or she doesn't see things the same way as I do sometimes. Do you know what I mean? But I'm so proud of her. I am so proud of what she's done. She made this big set of steps. I mean, like literally in TAFE, she made these big steps. But the one thing that she was saying, I made so many mistakes. I said, sweetheart, if you can't make mistakes making a set of steps in TAFE, when else can you make mistakes? Do you know what I mean? That's it. I said, have you ever built steps before? No. So there you go. If you can't make, but it's that program that we've got that we're not good enough, that we've got to do it better, that it's got to be this way. And it's so damaging. It really, really is. This is the, you know, advertising, Netflix films, the program that we get from Disney when we were children. Do you know what I mean? That's a huge...
Social media now is just, you got to be so discerning if you're on there. And unfortunately, you know, kids, these, you know, young ones, they can't be, because they're you know, they're still learning how to discern. So
yeah, well, that's if they can learn how to discern, if they've got parents who can't discern. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, when you look at it like this, when you actually look at it, it seems like it's overwhelming what's happening in the world at the moment, and where we've got to go back to actually start healing, so that we can get to a place. There's pockets of it, people are doing it, and resonance. You know, if we start putting that out as energy and resonance, but the way that we have been degraded and molded and hurt by what's been going on in the world it's terrible, really.
Yeah.
It really is. You know, I've got no other words for it. It's just like, oh my word, what's happened to everybody.
But this is a time now that, you know, like I said earlier, like we're seeing the shift, and it's just about choice. It's just going to come down to individual choice, because we can't start making, and I think so many people make that mistake, especially in the last few years, or, you know, these activist types, they want to, again, it's just, they want to externalize. They see all the problems as outside of themselves. So they want to fix the problems outside of themselves. And it's not that you can't do that. Like, there can be causes that you want to, you know, work with or bring awareness to or whatever, that's fine. But if you're not doing that work within yourself, you're not going to have much impact in the external world, because it starts here. It starts with you.
100%. 100%. You know, being angry about what you see out there is just really creating the same sort of energy that you're railing against.
Yeah.
It literally is that, like I said, that voice that I heard, you are fighting a mirror. Whatever you see out there is literally reflecting back what's going on in here. And that's a really uncomfortable premise for people to understand. And not a lot, and you know, some people can't. They come, I sit with people who come, they have 2 or 3 sessions, and when they realize that actually the work is, it's not about fixing that person there, they're a bastard and they're doing this to me. It's actually, well, what is it in you that's allowing that? What is it that in you that's believing that that's okay and allowing that sort of behavior, you know? And that's not to say that it's fault. We're not pointing the fingers of blame anywhere here. Once people begin to realize that hurt got them to the place that they're at, and that these parts of ourselves are attracted to that because that's what love looked like. That's what it looked like. That's what you learn. And we find ourselves with the partners, until we are aware of who we really are, we'll attract partners that are our primary caregivers, which are our parents. Yeah. Because the brain is automating all the time. There's so much information coming in. The brain runs on like you know, on what is it, comparison, contrast, and memory. And what will happen is that a situation will come up and it goes, oh, it will go through the Rolodex, you know, like, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? Oh, we know what that is. That's what happened then. And you'll respond, or react rather, in that way, because that's the way that you did. And we're constantly looking for that. We're constantly, unawarely looking for the things that will remind us. So, you know, when I work with some of the young women that I work with, and they realize that actually, and I realized it myself, you know, like, oh my God, I was in relationships with my father. That inner child was constantly trying to heal that wound, constantly, until I became the parent to that inner child myself. I'm not looking to a man to fix what I didn't have. I'm giving that to myself. I become a whole person. And what can I've got more to offer to a relationship if I come from a place of wholeness, and I take responsibility for those parts, and I'm not asking somebody else. Even through my daughter, you know, I realized, and I talked to a lot of parents, you know, about, I realized that what I was doing, and I won't speak generally, I'll speak about myself. I was trying to save my daughter, but in doing that, the message I was giving her, so when she was going through difficult situations and having, you know, relationships, because she didn't know her dad, and I left her dad, and he decided not to be in her life, so she didn't have a father figure. And so her journey has to start to learn to love herself from that masculine perspective, from her own inner masculine, and provide that for herself from her own animus, you know. And I wanted to save her from that. But what I'm doing when I'm doing that is trying to save myself, because I'm looking at her and seeing the mistakes that I used to make. So I'm trying to recreate and save myself through her. But I'm actually giving her the message that I don't trust that you've got this. If I step in and try and say, so, you know, like in drug and alcohol counselling with parents of children who are drinking or using drugs, and they'll try and save their children by, you know, at least if they're in my house and I'm paying for their rent and I'm giving them food and I'm providing everything around them, at least I know that they're there. And so if they do get drunk or if they do take drugs, they've got a safe place. And I'm saying, yes, I can, absolutely, that's relevant. Of course you want to look after, but what you're doing is you're enabling that behavior. And you're not saying to that person, I love you enough to watch you, to see that you fall, not to hurt themselves, but to fall, so that you then learn to pick yourself back up. Because if we're handing it to our children, we're not giving them resilience. So the child that falls over and the child mother comes in and goes, oh, it's okay, you'll be all right, and rubs the arm or, you know, rubs the, come on, let's go and eat something. We'll have some chocolate. It's taken them away from experiencing that feeling of having the full emotional response, the neurological system going from feeling calm, ventral vagal, into sympathetic, and coming back down again with somebody who's regulated and knows you've got this. I'm here with you. It's scary, but I'm here with you. Yep, that's really painful. Ouch. But allowing the child to have their feelings, to cry it out, be there for them. Don't panic. Don't try and get rid of it. Don't try and shut it down, but allow them to have the feelings, because you'll grow into an adult. If you're not allowed to have your feelings, you'll grow into an adult who'll do anything not to feel uncomfortable in their feelings.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's funny because, yeah, just as you're saying that, like I notice it now that I, you know, have this awareness. You see it. I actually do. I often observe parents with their children, either when I'm out or, you know, in my family. And you can see it. It's the ones that probably because they were raised the same way. And it tends to be like the anxious attachment where the child falls and they rush over and they pick them up. And I just think, you're just conditioning them to not be able to soothe themselves at all. But then quite often what I love about the area that we live in is, you know, when we're at the markets or actually at the Living Free Festival over the weekend, you just saw kids falling over and the parents that can see them, they're like, you're all right. And quite often they're the ones that the parent's there and they know, like the child knows that their parent is there to, you know, if they need them, but quite often they're the ones they fall over and you see it, they kind of look to see how their parent reacts and they don't react and they just get up and they don't cry and, you know, and then they kind of walk over and, you know, dad will go, you're all right, mate. And it's like chalk and cheese and it's just really interesting to watch. But again, it's just the parents will often just carry out the way that they were raised.
Yeah. And they're trying to get away from their own uncomfortable feelings as well.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I learned a big lesson from she's my friend and mentor, about babies crying. Like I was saying earlier on, you know, everybody pats the baby and rocks the baby and stops the baby from crying because we don't like to hear the crying. You know what I mean? It's uncomfortable for us to hear. Now, that's not to say that we ignore the crying. You know, that caused a whole load of damage in children. There's a whole, you know, the baby boomers, when you look back, there's a really another interesting book that you might be interested in is Alice Miller, It's for Your Own Good. Have you read that?
Yeah. Adding that to the list.
That's a really good book. So Alice Miller was a psychologist she was a Jew in the war, and she went through trauma, the whole trauma in the war. And she wrote a book about how childhood, the experiences that children have, then create people like Hitler or child mass murderers, or, you know, how our childhood experiences and how we're parented create what we see then in the world, in you know, people like Hitler and all those sorts of people, Pol Pot, whoever else it was. And that's saying, you know, it's for your own good. Children seen, not heard. You don't speak. And how many times, I mean, I remember it. I remember being told that I'm only punishing you because it's for your own good. You know what I mean? And you're like, as a child, well, how is this for my own good? And if you say something about that, well, then you're just cheeky, and you're and it makes it just worse. Do you know what I mean? Questioning.
Yeah.
You know,
and Wasn't there something about is it called the Ferber method? I can't remember, where you let the child cry.
Yeah.
There was something about the time that was introduced, and then like obviously years later, it's
Yeah.
like this generation of, and again that forms like more of the anxious avoidant attachment, because they just learn to self-soothe from a really young age. But then I was listening to something recently where they were talking about that, and they literally mapped out like when that was introduced, it was encouraged for parents to use this method to let their babies cry, and they didn't have as much physical touch, and it just creates so much emotional dysregulation and disconnection.
Yeah. Crying, allowing a baby to cry is one thing. Allowing them to cry on their own is something completely different. Holding them when they cry, being pleased with them, meeting their needs. A baby has to tell, that's the only way they've got is to communicate, is to cry. So, wet, hungry, needing a hug. Sometimes you'll just pick the baby up and it will stop crying because that's all they wanted was that physical contact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they needed a nappy change, or they needed some milk, or whatever it is. So there's leaving the baby to cry on their own, that's the damage. If a baby's had everything that it needs and there's nothing physically wrong with the child, and you've got to go through that first of all, children born with hip dysplasia, or a traumatic birth, cranios, sometimes their neck, the cervical spine is out, and that creates nervous system dysregulation. So osteocranial sacral therapy, just to move them back into position, has an enormous effect on the nervous system for the child. You know what I mean? So you've got to eliminate all those sorts of things. But a baby crying isn't an issue. It isn't a problem if the parents don't see it as a problem. But again, it's about the child needs to know that you're there. Children need our attention. That's all they need, is love and attention and a secure base. I learned something the other day, that actually children's IQs are higher before they start school than when they finish school.
I believe that.
Wow.
I believe that. I've always said that. I'm like, I swear the older I got, the dumber I got. I've always said it. I swear.
100%. Absolutely. Children know what to do. They absolutely do, and we've had this Victorian age where children are seen and not heard. We think that children are stupid, but when you sit and listen to a child, they'll point things out to you. They've got it sorted. Do you know what I mean? If they're in a safe environment, it's about safety. And for what I would say to everybody, fundamentally, my it's not even a belief. My knowing is that if we're going to create a world in which we're healing, it's fundamentally about nervous system regulation, establishing safety within ourselves. Safety will never be seen or felt out there.
Yeah.
We can have a perfect utopian world, but if our nervous systems are dysregulated, we're not going to experience safety.
Yeah.
And I think that the past 4 years has really, really brought that into sharp focus. I realized really soon into this, because I knew that I wasn't going to have that injection. I knew it. There was no way on God's earth was I going to have that injection. But at the same time, it was like, between a rock and a hard place. I'd always been terrified. My father was always going on about money, and so I was programmed that money is scarce and that you have to work hard for money, and that if you don't have a job, then you're not productive. And then, so I was full of terror about losing my job. But leading up to the nonsense, I'd been developing my PMA. I'd been creating my website. And I remember saying to my friend who I was living with at the time, I said to her, I don't know. I feel as if I'm being sort of making my website, and I'm doing that, and then I'm doing this, and there doesn't seem to be any pressure around it. It just seems to be like, oh, I'm doing this now, and I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to do that now. So when the sword actually fell in September of 2021 and I lost my job, I realized that everything I had, it was all ready to go.
Yeah.
And there was a knowing in me that I would be all right. It's, the way that I see it, Alexa and Isaac, is that if we can establish regulation within ourselves, if we can be with our bodies and feel what's happening, we can access that still point inside of us. It's there. It's always there. Self-energy is always there. That's our connection to God. It's our connection to creation. It's our connection to source. Now, if we can quieten the noise around us, and through that is by doing that is regulating our nervous system. If we can quiet that noise, we have access to that stillness inside, that knowing that we are all right. How can we not be? We belong. We are made of this. This is us. You know, the nature, the world, consciousness is us. And I fully believe that the second coming, if you like, if you want to put it in those terms, because I think we're in the little season, I have to say. I don't think that we're coming up for tribulation. I think we're in the little season. But if we that comes through us, that second coming, if you like, that is coming through, has to come through us. And it comes through us by learning who we really are, regulating our nervous systems, accepting ourselves for who we are, warts and all. I'm not freaking perfect. Do you know what I mean? I get shaky every now and then and get panicky, and, you know, and because, you know, the selling where I'm living at the moment. And every now and then I get this wave of, oh, where am I going to live? And then I think, oh, remember, it's okay. You know, that's not to disassociate myself from any responsibility of finding something, or at least pointing myself in the direction of what it is that I want and feeling it. I'm not just sitting back and going, oh, all will be provided like The Secret. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's but I'm having an impact on it. I'm directing it, I'm creating it, but I'm not creating it from a place of fear and grasping. I'm creating it from a place of resonance and safety from within, you know. And that's what I want to spread far and wide, is understanding your attachment. How did you learn to be who you are? How did you learn to be in relationship with yourself and with the world? And through nervous system regulation and understanding what happened to your ancestors and the impact of what happened to your ancestors has on you, and then how then that impacts you moving forward. And being aware that there are dark forces. That's a reality. It's not to be frightened of it, but to be aware of it, that we have to be aware of those dark forces. And those dark forces are present in pharmaceutical medications. They're present in drugs off the street. We can use what God gave us, psilocybin mushrooms, even cannabis to a certain extent. But there are some people who can't use cannabis, you know, and the street stuff that we get. And I'm entirely not sure about what all this prescribed cannabis, that the medical cannabis, the government. Where's how's that being grown? What spells are being put into that?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, and like I said, not everybody, because there are some people who are their connection is very loose. And so they need to stay grounded in, down. Yeah. Their propensity now. And this is an interesting fact. This is just my sort of small piece of research in myself. But every single client that I've had was born with the cord wrapped around their neck.
Oh, wow.
They disassociate and psychosis.
Oh,
I have a propensity for that really easily. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense, doesn't it? You're born with the cord wrapped around your neck. Your first breath is, I'm going to die. What do you do as a child? I'm out of here. Do you know what I mean? You're out of your body because it's terror in the body. And so anything that dysregulates those people, they go straight through nervous sympathetic, fight, flight, into disassociation. They're out the top. And so it's about bringing, some people need to be brought back down and grounded. Some people need to come back up and out and get their energy out. And we need to learn about ourselves. What do I need? How energetically, what do I need? You know, and that's what my role is helping people to see what it is, what happened to them, that they're not bad. They're not mad. They're not sick. They're hurting. We're all hurting. And if we can see that about everybody, and that's not being blind, you know, and I feel like I have to justify what I say here. I'm not going to say I'm going to accept Anthony Fauci or Andrew, what's his name? Who's that idiot who was...
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, I forgot his name too. Dan Andrews.
Dan Andrews, that's right, yeah. you know, there's some demons going on there for sure.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we accept them into our lives blindly. So like if you're married to somebody who is, or you're in a relationship with somebody who is hurting you, either physically or psychologically, you're not going to love them into cut back into being good again. You've got to know when to get out, when to look after yourself, when to hold that energy of the only thing I can do is move away from this, is get away from this. But then you've got to love yourself enough to be able to get out of it and see that what this is not right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About this ad infinitum, really. But
Yeah. Oh, honestly, Julie, we could talk to you for hours, and it would just feel like 5 minutes has passed, because even just this time has gone so quickly. And I've absolutely loved this conversation, and it's amazing, this work that you're doing with people. And so I want to let everyone know how they can get in touch with you if they do want to work with you. And do you actually specialize with anyone in particular, or?
Well, generally I work with people. I go quite deep. So fundamentally, I come from a holistic counselling perspective. So this is body, mind, spirit. So it's trauma informed. So I will always go back to the beginnings and to the ancestry. And I will always use my knowledge of family constellations. I want to actually do groups of family constellations, but I've got to finish the course first. But I predominantly, I really enjoy working with people who are coming down off pharmaceutical medications. So I've done a lot of work. I'm a drug and alcohol counsellor. That was my initial counselling qualification. So the job that I lost was working with people who were trying to come off their pharmaceutical medications. So benzos, all the benzos, antidepressants, opiates, all those sorts of things. And obviously street drugs as well. So I love working with people in that way and helping them. And I use the hyperbolic tapering. So I'm doing a lot of studying with Dr. Roger McFillin and Dr. Joseph Gearing and Mark Horowitz, because they're using the hyperbolic tapering. So I work with all sorts of people. And I have a website, which is refocuscounselling.com.au, and I have a Telegram group. I'm not on Facebook or Instagram or any of those sorts of things, because I'm a private membership association.
Yep.
So I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth and networking, and people tend to refer their friends. They come and see me and they like what I do, and they refer their friends and their families, and so that's how people can get in contact with me.
Awesome.
That's great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
And for those out there, if anything resonated in this talk, don't hesitate. Reach out and start your transformation. Start going down that path today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, the pair of you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and natural art form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies to help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform. We're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.